suggest?
You can use part of your tongue to deaden stuff. It's not really deadening. It's more or less trying to get it so you're able to scoop into another note because you're not allowing it. You're not trying to deaden it, but you're also not trying to allow it to ring in its natural capacity,
right, so
that you're not getting the sound that it wants to naturally make. So. Like something like that is when I'm actually like using a really slow tonguing, and I'm starting with my tongue on the reed, but I'm not releasing it like most people would. It would be more like that. So I don't know if that's probably not what you're talking about though. But
no, I heard it very subtly when you were playing. It was like
Well, one thing that I will say too is as you start doing all these things more and more, and you just play, it's harder to analyze what you're doing because you've analyzed it already, and then you kind of just play. So I apologize that I can't pinpoint exactly, but yeah.
What is your traditional preference for embouchure?
I really have a relaxed embouchure. And I do in part because I play a lot. I feel if I had a very tense embouchure, which there's some people that do and they sound great and I really like it. But for me, I was having all types of problems, probably 5 years ago, especially playing soprano. Like I would just have, it looked like someone took like, a razor blade to my lips almost, because that happens. Oh yeah. No, I've been there. So I decided to, again, a medium strength reed, medium open mouthpiece, not too tight of an embouchure. And then I feel like I can play soprano even all day, every day, and it's no problem.
How do you loosen it though? I'm so ingrained in this other.
That's a super good question, and the way to loosen it is with the air, like I'm talking about, like the different shapes of air. Because if you are supporting your sound in the way that I feel is, to its full capacity, there's so much air, it really almost acts as the support that a lot of people try to have from here is really just coming now out of you. If I tense up my embouchure, that's a fine sound, and I'm using a fair amount of air. But if I loosen up my embouchure but replace it with even more air, not volume, but like right there, I felt like my airflow was kind of more in the E. But if I'm really I can really go. There's no pressure right here at that point. It's like effortless right here, and the sound is actually, I think, bigger, and I actually think more flexible, even for soft or prettier stuff. Or if I want to play louder. There's almost no pressure. It really feels as if you just go like that. As where a stiffer embouchure feels more like, like that on some level.
You buy a little more out than in?
I definitely am trying to use as much of my lip as possible. So I guess it's not so much that I'm trying to jet it out, but I'm trying to make sure that if I was just going to keep it relaxed as if I wasn't talking, that's my normal expression on my face. That's pretty much how I'm keeping it. So, yeah.
I had a couple of questions about your alternate fingerings, and maybe everybody else already knows this since I'm not a saxophonist. When you were demonstrating different fingers with the same note, it seemed like you usually would slide into one of them and hit the other one right on. Why was that?
Some of them, and it depends, some of them I naturally feel are meant to be, I don't want to use the word greasy, but like if you use this B flat, if you're going to use like a regular B flat, versus if you're going to use a false one like I was just doing, where it's incorporating all these other notes, there's just something about like the Dexter Gordon type sound where he would do the. I might be too contemporary sounding to properly do it, but for those types of lip, by adding more keys, it is giving you more to push against as far as your air and everything goes. So there's naturally more nuances. Some of them though is more just how I hear them in my head. When I hear the this D, and this was one of the ones that I was demonstrating, the middle D. I hear that that as a note that is, meant within the scale of the saxophone. That's the standard, typical, way of playing D. That's probably my default D in my mind. So I'm probably not going to do anything with it unless I'm thinking about it. But then when I demonstrate the other ones, because I've done it so much, my natural thought in my mind when I use those notes is because I want to make something sound a little more edgy, a little more dirty, however, and I probably naturally do those. So since I naturally do them in my normal playing, I was naturally doing them earlier. For example, like, the alternate D. I can just start on it, but if I was just going to start on a D, I probably would just start on it, which is the more typical one. So like when I'm thinking, I'm used to using those as a way to ghost into stuff, especially because I do like to use the looser embouchure. I think I tend to rely more on the nuances of the keys, and knowing that we can play a G to a B flat like this, or we can go. There's very little nuance going on here. It's mostly at the speed that I'm releasing these keys and adding these. So I guess, there's so many just, other sounds and nuances and whatnot that we can create by using all of that stuff that we have available in our arsenal, as opposed to just a few. And I think most people might use this piece and this piece, but I guess, in a more abstract way, I'm just trying to encourage everybody to not limit yourself and to make sure to draw from everything that's possible. And there's probably a lot more stuff possible than you realize. There's probably more stuff possible than I even know, because I feel like I'm still, every time I discover one thing, it kind of leads to something else. So it's pretty cool. So yeah.
It's kind of off topic, but I mean, you play with a lot of legend stuff. I'm just curious how you approach standards and getting in the changes, literally. I mean, do you have a lot of exercise, like voice lifting exercises and stuff, or like what do you really do?
That's a really good question. Because piano was my first instrument, I always, especially if I'm learning a new song, there's so many songs that people ask me to learn that might be kind of based on standards, might not be, might have a lot of 2-5-1 and or somewhat standard chord progressions, might not. Either which way, I always like to sit down at the piano, and like we're talking about different ways of fingering notes, I like to try to come up with as many voicings as I can and just get the sound in my head. And this is like, if you have the time to do it. A lot of times people put down something in front of you and they say, here we go. And I remember, Randy Brecker, when I was a teenager, we recorded on my Pins and Needles album, and I was about 17 or 18, we recorded Night and Day. And I had never played the song before, and he had a version that he had worked up, and it wasn't like G minor 7, C7 flat 9, F major. It was like G minor 7, A flat Phrygian, F. It was not like I was used to seeing it. So, and really, I had about half hour to look over the chord change, and we recorded it, and went on the album. It was probably the best cut of the album, because sometimes you're on your toes. But if I'm going to approach something. If I'm playing the melody, it's one thing because I like to have that in my mind. But when I'm approaching the chord changes, I like to especially keep in mind, this is something that I think is real important that I wasn't even going to get into today, but I think this is real important, the use of the diminished scale and how it applies to 2-5-1s and chords in general. When people usually play diminished scales, and the way you see it in the book, that's almost always the standard way you'll see like C, D, E flat, I was taught by not only Randy Brecker, but I also got to play with McCoy Tyner for a few weeks right after Charles Jones' band, and he's the one that kind of straightened me out on this. It's the opposite. It needs to be whole, half, but descending, not ascending. So instead of, this is descending. And when you start using that, who's heard the sevenths and thirds resolve? That's kind of a standard.